Self-Care Tips and Advice to Be Your Best, episode 579.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
So today we're talking with my friend Mandy Froehlich about self-care. And Mandy, you have lots of information for us. Start off with some guidelines and help us understand how we need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Vicki, for having me here. So there's a couple things that I had to learn about self-care that are just, again, guidelines for things that are true about self-care. One of them is that self-care feels good and makes you happy. And I think that sometimes we get to a point where we're so stressed all the time that feeling happy is actually uncomfortable. But self-care should feel that way. It should make you happy. It needs to focus on the positive self-talk. You know, Brene Brown says, if you wouldn't say something to your kids, why are you saying it to yourself in your own head? So talk to us ourselves like we would talk to our own children. Avoiding drama and negativity, letting go of what you can't control and focusing on what you can. That's a big part of kind of disassociating yourself with things that you can't control that bring you stress. And then also know when to say no and be excited about saying yes. So when you want to do something, be excited about it. Know when you have too much on your plate in order to do that.
You know, and a lot of that is also how we set our expectations from our students, because I'm thinking of a particular student who kind of likes to kick up drama. Mm-hmm. You know, a young man is out and he tries to, get me upset. And I'm like, mind your own business. We don't do drama. Mm-hmm. Because if you discourage the drama, then you just have less drama because, why? I say save your drama for your llama or your mama, but not for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think sometimes also, I'm not even sure that some of the kids, I would say even adults, know that what they're doing is drama. I think it's just the way they've been brought up or the way that their family operates, and they don't even know that that's what that is. So it is good to kind of point that out.
Help them understand it. Yeah. And there's just so many things here, knowing when to say no is so difficult. And I think somewhere in year 8, 9, or 10, I realized that I had just had too much on my plate. And I think when you have a great administrator, they help you say no. Mm-hmm. But a weaker administrator makes you say yes until there's no more of you to give.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Especially with like you, the strongest teachers in the school, they're going to be the ones that get the most piled on them because they're the ones the administrators trust the most to get it done. And then what happens is those teachers just have plates that are overfilled and they can't take care of themselves.
What is self-care? Can you help us understand how we should take care of ourselves?
So a while back, I started thinking about self-care, and I was trying very hard to start. I was dealing with a little bit of burnout and trying to be very intentional on what I was doing with self-care. And I started to think about the things that I considered to be self-care that I was doing. And I found that I did a lot of intellectual self-care, but I thought, well, that's kind of funny because I do a lot of intellectual self-care. You would think that would be healing and reduce stress, but yet I'm not working out. So clearly I'm not doing self-care in that area. So then I started to research a little bit what the different kinds of self-care there are. Now, some people out there have lists of 12, 15 different kinds of self-care. And I think that anytime that we're trying to remember a huge long list, that right there is going against our self-care. So yep. I boiled it down to 4 different kinds that everything kind of fits under. And those are physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual.
And they're important. You need all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's awesome if you're doing a lot of self-care in one area, but if you're not hitting the other areas, you're really not addressing the whole person. It's really not a holistic approach to what self-care is supposed to be. So like physical self-care is, of course, anything that you do to take care of your body. A lot of people, this is the area that people are like, do yoga, but I don't like yoga. So, some other kinds of physical self-care are walking the dog, putting on some music and dancing like nobody's watching, swimming, going horseback riding, gardening, any of those types of things are self-care. And then we also have the kind of self-care that's very practical, attending to your dental needs, eating healthy, getting regular physicals, things like that. So all of that would fit under physical self-care.
And all those are important. I mean, after we finish recording this, I'm going to go run. So, you have to make time and track those things. Okay. Do you want to dig into each of the types of self-care? Like what would you do for intellectual self-care?
Yeah, absolutely. So for intellectual self-care, that's if physical self-care is taking care of your body, intellectual self-care is, of course, taking care of your mind. It is also the one that when I do this as a session, it is the one that educators report doing the most of because we're natural learners. So that's what we like to do. It's anything that we've cultivated with our own curiosity. We want to learn, expand our minds. So it would be things like playing board games, reading a newspaper, doing a crossword, even having a really stimulating conversation that pushes your thinking with another person is all kind of intellectual self-care. And then we also have emotional self-care. So that one I say is taking care of your heart. That is where you're trying your best to feel balanced. And we've talked about this in a podcast before. Balance does not mean 50-50 all the time. And if that's what your goal is, you're going to feel like you're failing. Sometimes it is more time at work when it's necessary. Sometimes it's more your family. It's kind of an average. And, even with emotions, some days you're going to feel sad, some you're going to feel happy, some are going to be frustrating. That's all okay, as long as you're feeling happy and satisfied most of the time. So some suggestions for emotional self-care are to see a counselor. You can do that even when you're not struggling. It is always appropriate to see a counselor. Spending time with friends who make you laugh, learning to accept a compliment and show gratitude for that compliment.
Many times I can tell when this is out of balance, if teachers confide things in students as a class, classes are not a therapist.
Yeah.
And when I find somebody, and a lot of times it happens with newer teachers, who are closer in age, and they'll tell a class something, and I'm thinking, what were you thinking? Couldn't you tell a friend? And then, well, I don't really have any friends. I'm like, well, let's try to help be balanced because we need relationships, but there is a certain appropriateness for a relationship with your students versus your relationship with your colleagues.
Absolutely. And if you're missing those relationships, you are definitely not attending to the emotional and possibly the spiritual self-care as well.
Okay, let's talk spiritual.
All right. So spiritual, a lot of people first say to me, well, I can't practice spiritual self-care because I'm not particularly religious. It's really not about being religious. It's taking care of your soul. And so emotional self-care, you're trying to feel balanced. In spiritual self-care, you're trying to feel centered. And so it really involves anything that feeds your soul. So things like communing with nature, volunteering for a cause that you love, keeping a gratitude journal, practicing a random act of kindness. So different things like that are just going to make you feel more like yourself. Another one or two more that I really like that falls under spiritual self-care are learning to forgive other people and what that means, and making peace with your past. So all of those things kind of fall underneath the spiritual self-care.
Yeah. And, for me, every morning I get up and pray and read my Bible first thing in the morning. And then I'll also spend time listening to music, writing in my journal. I mean, could not have a day without it. I just couldn't. I mean, that's the secret to my own success. And I think that's important. We get faced with so many difficult situations with kids that we need to be at peace with the bigger questions of life. What is life? Where do we go when we die? I mean, these are things that we need to consider as part of living and be at peace with those decisions. Just because you ignore something doesn't mean it's not there. And I do believe that we all have a soul and that's part of who we are. I think that's important that we need to talk about. Now, you had one or two other little tips so we can finish up.
That's self-care for everybody, really. But I tried to kind of break it down into some teacher-specific things. So you're in the middle of a classroom. Kids are working on a project. They're all very loud, like a good loud. They're working. But then you have, the 5 kids who don't necessarily follow directions like everyone else. And they're all up there asking you questions. And it's just getting a little crazy. And so there's a few things that you can do. You can take a deep breath. And this really sounds too good to be true. But taking a deep breath helps you move out of your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, to your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relaxing system. So your breath literally tells your body to relax, especially if you know of or you practice conscious breathing techniques, then it's very helpful. You can have a happiness kit ready. Take 30 seconds, look at your happiness kit. I've heard them call a few different things, but basically they're first aid kits for when you need to feel happy. They're in a little box or a little package. They're kept in your desk, and they should be filled with small items or photographs that bring you joy. involve the students. If you need a break, possibly they do too. Have the students take a break, have them regroup, focus back on their learning, take some deep breaths, those types of things. And then finally, and this one's a little bit up for debate, but taking advantage of therapy animals. Some people, have a hard time with therapy animals because of, obvious reasons like allergies and things like that. But if you are able to, they are a fantastic way to reduce stress.
These are so many great ideas, and there's lots of conversation going on. But in the end, been doing this for 18 years now, and there have been times where I have been pushed really close to burnout. But and sometimes I've actually burnt out, and that's really hard to come back from. But I know for me, as I've gotten older and healthier in my career, just realizing that I'm about to push myself over the edge has just been so important, so that I could say, okay, let's take a deep breath and step back, and let's stop doing some things, because we do have to take ownership of our own physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, because if we don't, nobody else will. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you.
So, my friend, this is your excuse to just stop and to think. How do you feel right now? Are you worried? Are you stressed? What do you feel like this moment? I hope that you'll use this as an excuse to do sort of a self-care checkup. Do you need to stop? Do you need to figure some more time to exercise? Do you need to just plan to go home a little early and get some sleep? Take the steps that you need so you can rest to be your best. We all have to take better care of ourselves, myself included. And I hope today's show will challenge you to do just that.